One of the most impactful things about these trips is hearing the stories of the living conditions of the families that we are building for. And on this trip, we built for a family that was in some really difficult living conditions. They were actually living in what's been described to us as an old industrial oven that cooked sugarcane kind of underneath a road down in the ground. Walking into it, you could smell mold, you could tell that it was not sanitary conditions, and their little baby had actually experienced significant health issues. She had had a blood infection that they said was the result of the living conditions that ended up having her stay in the hospital for over 15 days. And we were able on this trip to build them a brand new home with a concrete floor, which we know a concrete floor decreases the infant mortality rate by 50%. This family's life was literally drastically altered this week just by the building of a home with a concrete floor. So as always, thank you for your generosity. It is making an impact in real lives around the world.
Wow, wow, wow. Wow, wow, wow. You know, our family has been building homes for other families around the world for 11 years now. And I have to tell you, when we saw the living conditions of that family, it was quite possibly the worst we had ever seen. I'll never forget going almost underground into that house. And as soon as I stepped in, you could feel the moisture in the air. You could smell the mold and the mildew. And I just looked around like I couldn't imagine living here, but also trying to raise a child here, to raise a baby. I think I told someone on the trip, if you were to take a t-shirt and stick it down in that house, after about 2 weeks, it wouldn't even be wearable. It would be covered in mold, it would be mildew, it would stink. And we have babies living down here. And so that immediately became like the priority for Via Japón to get families out of there. There are other families living like that. And I am happy to tell you, we were back in that community in September, and we built 3 more homes for families there. We got 3 more families out. And it was actually kind of funny. We arrived there with a church from Maryland, an incredible church, and we get out of the van, and we walk kind of on that little cul-de-sac there, that little dead-end road, and this little girl came running out of her house when she heard the van. And she kind of looked at the team as everyone got out of the van, and she looked them up and down, and she looked around, and she had this weird look on her face, and she went over to my wife and said, "Where are the people that built my house?" And she's like, "Oh, that's a different team. That was a different church, a different team. These people are here to build this week." And this little girl turned around and went right back inside her house. And then she even tried again. A little while later, we started building. We're moving block. We're sifting sand. We're doing all the jobs. She comes out, looks around, finds Megan again, and says, "Where's the girl that did this job?" And started acting like she was sifting dirt. Megan said again, "This is a different church. That church isn't here. It's a new church, but we're going to have fun." I watched this girl turn around, walk back in her house again, crawl up on her bed, lay on her back, and just stare at the ceiling. So I want to personally thank you for absolutely ruining short-term missions for at least one little girl in Nicaragua who no one will ever add up to Harbor Church to this little girl, ever. You've ruined it, okay? Except for when you come back this June, right? You go back to see that little girl. She'll be ready. But it was an incredible time being on that little lot and building some more houses. And we actually went back to that neighborhood at the end of the week in September to kind of say our goodbyes. And when we pulled up, we saw this on one of the houses we had built. The moms in this community had decorated the house. They'd blown up balloons, they put it up there, and they had a little sign, and you probably can't read it from where you're sitting, but it says, "Un lugar de esperanza," which means a place of hope. They have deemed their little corner, where just 3 months prior, a little baby almost died, is now a place of hope. It's now a place of hope where they have family, and they have community, and they have the church, and Un lugar de esperanza is actually the name of the church in Via Japón that you guys support. And so that would be like showing up in a neighborhood in Sarasota and there's a big sign that says Harbor Church, but it's not Harbor Church, but it is Harbor Church because it's all one thing. And that's what we're building there together. Then in October, just a month later, we did our baptisms. Twice a year, we baptized a ton of people from all the communities, and people came from Via Japón to be baptized. We got a picture. That's actually a lady you guys have built a home for, being baptized. And there was more than just her. At the end, we got them all together. This is the Via Japón crew right there, getting baptized. And what I love about this, my wife mentioned it last night. She said, it's not like they came and said, "How do I get a house? Oh, I have to go to church and be baptized. Where do I sign up?" No, their children were fed and then discipled, and then they got saved, and then they received a home, and then they stayed plugged in, and then months later said, "I need to take the next step." And everything you see in that picture is a direct result of your giving, of the legacy offering, of your generosity. Lives changed forever. And so I want to thank you for that. And guess what? We get to do it all again next June, okay? Next June. And so today I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about some different things. And to me, this is going to be different than what I normally do. It may not feel any different to you, but it does to me, so I have to address it. What I want to do today is I want to tell you guys more of kind of the origin story of Hope Project, okay? I've been here several times. I've preached, I've talked, I've told some stories. But this church is always growing. It's always expanding. There's always new people. And there could be 25 people in here that have no clue who I am today, okay? And we don't want to leave you behind in what we're doing in missions together. So I'm going to take you back over 20 years. Believe it or not, I was just a little lad, a wee lad, right? And I want to bring you along the Hope Project story of how from 20 years ago, I got to this point where I'm standing in front of you today, okay? And I've wanted to do this a few times. I feel like today is the most appropriate. I found myself getting a little emotional backstage because I heard Jordan say just one sentence, just a phrase of words that to me is on a short list of words that are, I like to say, very dangerous in the best possible way, okay? Does that make sense? Very dangerous words in the best possible way. He said, missions trip meeting today after church, okay? That's a dangerous phrase. It doesn't sound like it, but it is. Because over 20 years ago, I was sitting in a church about 80 miles from where we're sitting right now. I was sitting right over here, I think like right there, okay? So listen up, this is for you, okay? And a little lady got up on stage and she said, missions trip meeting today after church. And then she actually said, through this door right over here. And there's a door here. But that's not where the meeting is, right? Don't go through that door. You have to go all the way around, come back out the front to find the meeting, okay? But she said, missions trip meeting today after church. And I thought, I'll check that out, right? So after church, I got up, I went through the door, I sat down, had some orange juice and a muffin, free meal, already winning, right? But then I knew in the first 5 minutes, this wasn't for me. Because whoever was up there said these words, this trip will cost $1,200. I thought, well, count me out, right? If I don't finish the orange juice and I split this muffin with someone, how much do I owe you, okay? Because I don't have any money. I was like, $1,200 is like my gross annual income at the time. And I'm thinking, I'll never have $1,200. So I left the meeting kind of disappointed, but what was I missing out on? And then there was another meeting, and I didn't go to it. And then another. And then the youth pastor came to me and said, Dan, I thought you wanted to go on the missions trip. Their church was going to Haiti. They're going to build a church for a community up in the mountains. You got to be a part of this. You got to go to Haiti with us. And I said, I will never in my lifetime have $1,200 all at the same time. Okay? I may have $1,200 over the years. I'll never have it all in one place. And if I do, I can't give it to you, okay? I can't go to Haiti. And then the youth pastor said another set of words that I tell you they're dangerous in the best possible way. He said, why don't you just keep coming back to the meetings and see what God does? That's what he said. Just come back, just keep showing up and see what God does. And I said, okay. So I went to the next meeting and then the next. And this church loved meetings. I don't know what the deal was. I think they didn't have the internet, so no emails could go, okay? We had all these meetings. The final meeting, they said this, be at the church at this time. We're going to drive to Fort Lauderdale, and we're going to fly to Haiti. I said, okay. Came to the church. Got in a van. Drove to Fort Lauderdale. Stood at the airport. A guy came up and handed me a plane ticket. I got on a plane, and I went to Haiti. I never paid 1 penny to go on this trip, okay? Not 1 cent. I actually came home with $120 in my pocket. For real. It was like the miracle of the fish and the loaves. I went for 10 days to Haiti, and I came home with money in my pocket. It was unbelievable. And Haiti was incredible. We went there, we were building a church, and it got kind of weird, though. As soon as we got to Haiti, we drove up into the mountains. We get to where we're building this church. We get to the job site, and all these big construction workers from our team start building this. I mean, they're laying block, they're slinging mud, they're saying stuff. I don't know. I'm in the middle of it. I'm trying to move stuff, whatever. And then the Haitians that were working with us come and look at their work. They start talking. They have a little conversation, and then the Haitians start pushing over the blocks that our team was laying. Apparently, this is bad form on a job site, okay? Because our construction workers got real mad. And there's kind of this conversation going back and forth, an argument, and we're trying to lay block, and they're pushing it down. And so we got like the head of the whole thing to come see what's going on. So we talked to the Haitians. He came to us. He said, guys, listen. These men are earning $1 a day to build this church. They see how fast you're working. It's supposed to be a 2-week job. If you finish in 10 days, they miss out on $4. If you finish in a week, they miss out on a week's worth of pay, $7. Please just slow down and let them lead the work. And I had no idea at the time I was actually getting a foundational download that would be the rest of my life. That if you're going to build a church or a community, you can't just come in and do all the work and then disappear. You got to come alongside someone, and you got to stand with them and lay the block together. Sometimes you got to go at their pace, at their vision, the way they are going to reach their community. It was incredible because it also meant I didn't have to work anymore that week. I just played with kids. Now, what I'm about to say, if you go on the Hope Project trip, you can't do any of the things I'm about to say, okay? I didn't know better. Now I know better. Now I can tell you. I didn't work at all the rest of the week. I just played with kids. We played hacky sack. We tried different ways to communicate. I left the job site with a kid and met his family down the road one day. And then I started thinking, I'm going to play a little prank on the kids, okay? And at the time, it was a great idea. Thinking about it now, I might go to hell, okay? So if you get to heaven and I'm not there, this is why, okay? We had been giving the kids candy all week, little pieces of candy here and there. And about 3 days in, I thought it'd be funny to take candy wrappers and put rocks in them and kind of fold them back up. And I never told my wife this. Sorry. I had a pocket full of rocks with candy wrappers on them. And I would get close to a kid, and I'd kind of make eye contact. I'd kind of make it like a secret. I'd give him a piece of candy, and I'd just watch. And the kid would kind of slip away, and then he'd look at me like, are you serious? Did you just give me a rock? Okay, we didn't speak the same language. We spoke a lot through our eyes. I did that to several kids. And then I started playing this game with the kids. We were sitting on this pile of rocks, and I would just pick up a rock and put it on a kid's foot and look away. The first kid just kind of kicked it off. I would do it every couple hours, nothing going on. I'd just pick up a rock, put it on a kid's foot. A couple days into this, I'm sitting on a pile of rocks. A little boy walks up, picks up a rock, and puts it on my foot. And I thought, you want to play rock on the foot? You want to challenge me to a game of rock on the foot? I invented this game. So I actually picked up a bigger rock and put it on his foot. He picked up a bigger rock and put it on my foot. This went back and forth until I had a great idea. Another great one, okay? I stood up and turned around and acted like I was going to pick up the rock I was sitting on and put it on his foot. And I sent a whole group of children running through the mountains of Haiti, thinking this gringo was going to kill them with a rock, okay? This is what I did. It was my missions trip. It was a great experience. Don't do any of this stuff. It's in the meeting later. It's all outlined, okay? But towards the end of the week, they had a moment where this week became more than just a missions trip to me. We had a Haitian church service. Anyone here ever been to a Haitian church service? Okay, so you'll know. In Haiti, they do it right, okay? We had like at least 3 people preach for at least an hour and a half. And then we had altar time of ministry. And everyone in the church wanted to be prayed for. So they would come down, line the altars, we'd pray for them, ring a bell. They would go around and get back in line. The next group of people would come up. And you would do this all night long, just praying and seeking God. And I found myself at one moment at the altar surrounded by the kids that I had given rocks to for candy for the whole week. And they started praying for me. And I had a whole group of children just putting their hands on me and praying, just seeking God, laying their hands on me. And at first, I'll be honest, kids are this tall. When they put their arms out, their hands go in this area. And I felt very uncomfortable. And there was a moment I was about to push the kids away from me. And I felt God speak to me and say, do not push them away. He said, they're simply doing something they've never done before. And in the same way, I'm going to do something in you that I've never done before. And I knew in this moment that this was my calling. I was called to serve children. I was called to serve the nations. And it would look different than anything I had ever seen in my life. And in this moment, this missions trip now became a risk that I had taken that set me on an adventure that God had planned for me. A great risk to leave the country, to go for a week, to not pay any money and not have any money, but to go to Haiti for 10 days, became the greatest adventure that God had planned for me since the beginning. And that's how it is sometimes in the kingdom, when you take a risk and it becomes an adventure with God. And that's what it was for me. The adventure continued. I got home from Haiti, had that $120 in my pocket, yes. And something happened that around that time, I met a girl at college. There she was. She was out of my league, guys. She had been on missions trips. She had served around the world. She was incredible. She was out of my league. So I decided I got to figure out how to get this girl to notice me. So I brought my missions trip pictures to school. Yeah. I had a disposable camera, like 20 terrible photos, and I brought them to show Megan. That didn't work out like I thought it would. So I asked her to study with me, and we went and studied together in the library. And she thought I was the dumbest kid she'd ever met. And that was my game, and it worked. Because we took that test, I got a better grade on it than her, obviously. And we started dating, and our vision aligned, and our love for Jesus aligned, and what we saw the rest of our lives looking like aligned, and we decided, let's do this thing together for the rest of our lives. And we became kids pastors while dating in college. And we were kids pastors actually for 10 years. We knew we were called to the nations. We knew we were called to just go and just be a light wherever God would send us. But we knew we had to spend time doing the next thing in front of us, and that was kids ministry. So 10 years, kids pastors. And we would do crazy stuff. We had a bus ministry. So we wanted to bus kids into church. And so every Saturday, we would drive around our city. And if there were toys outside of a house, we would go knock on the door and say, hey, we're from the church. Can we take your kids on a bus tomorrow? And parents said yes, believe it or not. They would sign full medical waivers for us to pick their kids up the next day to go to church. And we just did whatever we could to get kids, more kids at church, more families, more people. We want to reach them. We want to take the gospel to them. We want to bring them in. And then we did this thing one year called the Great Stocking Giveaway. We completely made it up. It's a good name though, right? We made it up. And what we did was we told our church, for the month of November, bring as many toys as you can to the church. Put them in the lobby. And then on one specific Saturday, we're going to make as many Christmas stockings as we can. And then we're going to drive around our city and just give them away to kids. It was our plan. We didn't even have Christmas stockings, okay? But the people brought so many gifts, we had enough for 300 stockings. We literally made them. We took craft paper and a stapler and made these giant stockings of toys. And I actually have a picture that we took out. We found this one home. This home had 9 kids in it, living with grandma. And those are their Christmas stockings that year. My favorite part about this picture is the kid in the back. I actually zoomed in on it, just kind of checking out his stocking. I think he's like, this ain't no Christmas stocking. But he loved it, and we gave him out. We just drove all over. We drove to this one house, and we're like, all right, I see some toys. It was near our house. We knew kids lived there. We saw kids there all the time. We pull up, we get out, and this was my approach. Hey, are there any kids here? And these guys on the porch just looked at me like, what? I said, yeah, you got any kids living here? He said, no, there's no kids here. I'm thinking, there are kids here. I know there are. He knows there are. I got to convince him to let me know that. So I'm like, you're sure there aren't any kids here? They're like, no, man, there's no kids here. Keep it pushing, right? And I said, well, we were hoping there were kids here because we have a van full of Christmas toys, and we're going to give them to kids today. And he literally yelled, kids, get out here! And like 10 kids ran out of his house. And it was the Great Stocking Giveaway. And this is just what we did. For 10 years, we were kids pastors. And then somewhere along the line, we decided that we were going to do like this sermon series on Matthew chapter 25, okay? And actually, there's going to be some Bible involved in this. Finally, I'm here, all right? But Matthew 25, if you got a Bible, if you want to go there, about 9 years into kids ministry, we decided to do this sermon series on Matthew chapter 25 with our kids ministry. And you may have heard of Matthew 25. You may know immediately what it's going to be. The heading says the sheep and the goats on it. Some people call this a parable. I want to take you through this and kind of tell you what we did with our kids ministry, okay? Matthew 25, if you're there. We'll start with verse 31, okay? It says, when the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, he will sit on his throne in heavenly glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. And then the king will say to those on his right. Okay, I want to stop here for a second. You've probably heard this before. Even if you haven't, kind of the imagery, this is a very significant portion of Scripture. And I think it gets lost on us as just a story, especially with the sheep and goats part. Some people think it's a parable. Okay, this is not a parable, and this is not just a Bible story from the New Testament. This is a very significant portion of Scripture, talking about the final judgment, the end of the world. And what Jesus is doing here as he's giving this beginning, when he says the Son of Man, he's declaring exactly who he is to his audience. And he's actually giving a paraphrase of Daniel chapter 7, okay? He starts off by saying, when the Son of Man comes. The Son of Man is a kind of a way that Jesus would describe himself. The Son of Man is found 80 times in the New Testament and 100 times in the Old Testament. If you had any biblical literacy, you would know who Jesus is saying he is at this moment. He's the Son of Man. It's the Son of God. And he's actually paraphrasing Daniel chapter 7, where Daniel says, I saw a vision. I saw the Son of Man approach the Ancient of Days, and he was given authority and glory, and he was given a kingdom whose domain would last forever. As Jesus is setting up his story, he's saying, I'm the Son of Man. I'm the one Daniel saw. I have the authority and the glory, and I've been given a kingdom whose dominion will last forever. It's very, very significant. And then he says, okay, so he's got the sheep on the right, the goats on the left, okay? And then he says to those on his right, okay, so you guys over here, you're on my right, you're going to represent now for this portion, okay? He says to those on his right, come you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. Jesus is saying there is an inheritance for you. It's the kingdom, and it's been prepared for you since the creation of the world. I want you to think, I can't just pass by this part, okay? We're talking about an inheritance from the most creative person to ever create, okay? The most generous person to ever give. We're talking about God Almighty is preparing an inheritance since the beginning of time, okay? We know that God creates good things. Psalms tells us he creates good things out of dust. And he's been creating an inheritance for us since the beginning of time. I don't know what it is. I think it might be good. How many of you would like to have that inheritance, okay? Those on the left, pump your brakes. I'm talking to the right. I'll talk to you in a minute. This is for the people on the right, okay? This is the inheritance. This is how you receive it. Ready? For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. That's simple. I was hungry, and you fed me. Thirsty, you gave me a drink. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you came to visit me. I was in prison, and you came, and you looked after me. That's what Jesus says to those on his right. And they say, then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go visit you? And then the king will reply, I tell you the truth, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did it for me. Jesus says to those on his right, when you've done these things for the least of these brothers of mine, you've done it for me. And we wanted to teach this to our kids in our children's ministry. So we actually said, this is how we'll do it. We're going to get our team together, and we're going to tell the kids stories of how we're doing this in our lives. Has anyone here ever fed someone hungry? And we had this little intern. His name was Chupacabra, for real. You know Chup. Chup said, I've done it. Me and my wife go down and feed the homeless. And I said, great. This Sunday, you're going to tell the kids how you and your wife go feed the homeless. And that's what we did that Sunday. And we went through each one. Have you ever clothed anyone? Have you ever visited someone that was sick? Have you ever looked after someone? Have you ever visited anyone in prison? Has anyone ever done that? Visited someone in prison? Anyone? A couple people? Okay. Well, at this time, my wife and I were foster parents. I told you a little bit about this before. And the mother of our foster daughter was in prison. So we said, you know what? We're going to go visit her. And by we, I mean Megan. Megan's going to go visit her. But Megan doesn't drive. So we are going to go visit her, right? So I drove Megan down to the jail, and she went in to visit this inmate, this woman who had allowed her children to be abused so badly that in the middle of the night on the 4th of July, her house was raided, her and her boyfriend went to jail, and her children went into the foster care system. She was still sitting in a cell. And Megan went to visit her. And she walked in, the lady's like, what are you doing here? She's like, I'm here to visit my foster child's biological mother. And the lady's like, excuse me, say that again. I'm here to visit my foster child's biological mother. She's in jail here. And so she said, okay, we've never had this happen before, but you can do it. So Megan goes in. And the way they did it, Megan was scared to death, okay? If she was telling you the story, she was so scared. Okay, I was with Megan the first time she played with matches as an adult. I was with her the first time she hula hooped. And now she's walking into a jail to visit an inmate, okay? Scared to death. But praise God, she didn't have to go into the jail. They had like this little room that you could almost like video chat with the inmate. Megan sat there. They brought the mom in. She sat down and actually leaned forward so the camera went over her head and Megan couldn't see her. So Megan said, all right, that's what we'll do. I'm just going to talk to her. She said, I want to let you know that your daughter's doing great. She's in our house. She's growing up. She's going to preschool. She's learning to read and write. She's potty trained. Her vocabulary's growing. And the mom just sat there silent. And she said, also, I want to let you know that we've heard great things about you as you're in jail. We heard you're taking anger management classes. We heard you're studying. We heard you're doing all the things that you need to do to get your daughter back, and we're proud of you. And when Megan said, we are proud of you, this lady sat back so that she could see her face. And Megan just kept talking to her, kept encouraging her, kept saying nice things about her and her daughter. And by the end of the conversation, this lady was laughing and sharing stories with Megan. Completely changed in a tiny conversation. Why? Because she was in prison and someone came to visit her. Straight out of Scripture, straight from the Bible, we were living out the things that Jesus has called us to do. And it brought hope to that one lady for that one moment. She ended up getting out of jail and getting her kids back. And today, her whole family is together. And so we taught the kids this. We went through this whole thing with our kids in kids ministry. And as we did, we realized that this to-do list is pretty significant. Like, this is more than just, some options that you could do if you wanted to serve Jesus. This is like a must. And I talked to those on the right. I would do you a disservice if I didn't read you the rest of the verse, okay? So those on the left, sorry, this is not for me, but what it says, okay? Then he will say to those on his left, you chose the wrong seat in church today. Depart from me, you who are cursed, into eternal fire, prepared by the devil and his angels, for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty. You gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me. I've read this 1,000 times, and I still cry every time. Because Megan and I have stood in places where just weeks prior, children had starved to death. Okay? Documented child starvation cases where a little girl or a little boy died in their mother's arms because she couldn't find bread to put in their mouth. And we live in a world where Sam's and Costco and Publix exist, and children are still dying of starvation. And so when I read, I was hungry and no one fed me, I go right back to that neighborhood, and I go right back to that street, and I go right back to those people who are dealing with loss because they were hungry and no one fed them. And that's what Jesus says to those on the left. And then they also will answer, Lord, when did we see you hungry and thirsty, or a stranger needing clothes, or sick and in prison, and did not help you? And he will reply, I tell you the truth, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me. Then you will go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life. This to-do list is significant. It's not just a cute Bible story. And as Megan and I took the kids through this, we actually realized this is the rest of our lives, fulfilling this to-do list. We want to spend every breath we have doing these things around the world. And this is actually the moment we decided to start Hope Project International. We got together. We bought a book for $50 from Barnes & Noble. Does Barnes & Noble still exist even? Yeah? And we sat down on the back porch of our 997 square foot house and started dreaming and planning. And we said, you know what? If you're going to feed the hungry, you have to go places where there are hungry people. If you're going to quench the thirst of people, you have to be around people that are thirsty. If you're going to care for the sick, you have to be in close proximity to the sick, right? If you're going to visit the prisoner, you've got to go and actually do the visiting. And so we started Hope Project, and we said we're going to help children in the areas of nutrition, education, shelter, and spiritual development. And we're going to go to the places those kids exist. And the very first place we went was Nicaragua. We went there, October 2013. And we drove out to Cristo Rey. And I realized last summer, many of these people have never been to Cristo Rey even, which is crazy to think. But Cristo Rey is a trash dump community where thousands of people were living in a trash dump. A trash dump was deemed unsanitary, believe it or not, for people to be living in. And they were moved out into this field and given little plots of land. And they were just living. No water, no electricity, no schools, no medical facilities, nothing. And we knew someone going there, so we said, will you take us to meet those people? We actually drove to Cristo Rey. We drove by the trash dump. Someone on our team saw a little kid pick something out of the trash, show their friend, and then eat it. And we went out to this church where they had been feeding children. We said, let's go see the program. Maybe we can help. We'll see what happens. We get to the church. They're not feeding any kids. They said, we just lost all financial funding to feed the kids here. We have nothing but hungry kids. So we said, this is what we have. A 6-month-old organization. And listen to this number, guys. You won't believe it. And $1,200. Take the money and start feeding the kids again. We'll be back. Then we got in the van and said, we're coming back, right? Right? We have to come back. I think we just became financially responsible for a feeding program. And I actually had $1,200 all at once, and I gave it away. But since that day, guys, we have been back to Nicaragua, specifically 85 times. 85 trips have gone back there. More than 100 trips now around the world with Hope Project. We've built over 400 homes. We've provided up more than 750,000 meals to kids like the ones in Cristo Rey. We sent thousands of kids to school. We trained pastors and leaders and teachers all over the world. Because I took a risk 20 years ago and then found a girl who was 10 steps ahead of me, and then we ran as fast as we could into the adventure that God had for us. And that's where it landed us. And we've done all these things, and I think something we've never thought about happening that's just now starting to happen is we're starting to see the generational impact of two people that just decided to give it all to God. Generational impact. I actually want to show you guys some pictures today. I have a picture of the first time we went to Cristo Rey. This picture right here. Legitimately, the very first time, that was October 2013. I'm the guy there with no beard, but I do have a soul patch, but you can't see it. But it was glorious. Just stay on that picture real quick. Just stay right there. Oh, the next one. You can go to the next one. That little girl right there, okay, is the first girl we ever met in Cristo Rey. She's about 12 years old. Her name is Alicia, okay? And that's us taking a picture with her. Very first time in Cristo Rey saying, take our money, we're coming back, okay? 10 years later, the next picture, this is Alicia at one of our pastors' conferences. Yeah, right there. She's learning and studying, and she's saying, I want to be a leader in this church that I grew up in, that cared for me and loved me, and where I always knew I could find some food to eat. The next picture is my wife, Megan, and that's Alicia's baby, Megan, right there. Baby Megan. Generational impact, okay? The next picture is interesting. I'm going to show you this next one. Okay, we took a team of professional baseball players, November 2014. That little boy on the right is Juan Carlos, okay? And he connected hardcore with our friend from the Cardinals. And Juan Carlo actually became one of our, builders. He would help us build homes. For 10 years, he built homes with us. But then Juan Carlo, we say COVID got him. That's what we say. We couldn't send teams. We couldn't build. We couldn't be there in person. And during that time of COVID, Juan Carlo stepped away from the church. He started doing drugs, and he got caught up in the wrong crowd. And we kind of lost him for a couple years. But this past October, Juan Carlo came back to church. And he came back to the pastors' conference that we did with your pastors. And during one of the worship sessions, Juan Carlos had just come back to the church, was worshiping with us, and my wife took this next picture when she noticed on his arm, there's a tattoo that says hope in English. Hope. Generational impact of that first time we went and decided, let's keep going back and seeing what God will do. The next picture, some of you may know this little girl, that's Tiffany Sanchez, okay? She's the daughter of the main pastor that we partner with. Her brother is the pastor of Via Japón that you guys support. About 2 years before this picture was taken, this little girl was sleeping on the ground because her family had decided to move to Cristo Rey and see what God had for them there. And for 4 months, she slept on the ground because her parents said, we're going to take a risk, believing it will lead us to an adventure. 10 years later, this girl goes to university. She learns English. The next picture is her translating at a pastor's conference for me. Months later, the next picture is of her serving in Ethiopia. A little girl from a trash dump community who slept on the ground as a 10-year-old serving in Africa. The statistical probability of that is like 0.0000 something. But in the kingdom, it's 100% with generational impact. You know, one of the reasons I love Harbor Church, we love to be here, is because there's 2 things I want to see in my life, okay? Number 1, I want to see Jesus get the full reward for the work he did on the cross. 100%. Not one drop of blood wasted. The second thing I love to see and I want to see in my lifetime is the impact of generational ministry. And I want to tell you something about Harbor Church. You may not know this. The church is like 3 years old, but this church is the impact of generations of ministry. Your pastors, in their family, for generations, there has been blood, and there has been sweat, and there has been tears. And there have been people pouring their lives out on the adventure that God called them to. There have been people that have literally given it all to the battle that is full-time ministry. And you may have met them sometime in the last 3 years and not even realize that this is a generational ministry. And I actually want to say something to you today, Isabella. I'm glad you're in here, because I haven't seen you since this happened. But several months ago, Megan and I were traveling to speak at a church, and I was just praying on the way there, and I saw a picture of you in my head. And it's going to sound weird at first, but you were riding a horse, okay? But you looked so beautiful, and your hair was blowing in the wind, and you were smiling, and you just rode this horse like as fast as you could possibly ride it. And there was this vast field that you were riding in, just going all over the field. And as you were riding, you were actually throwing seed on either side of you. And the moment the seed hit the ground, flowers and fruit popped up. You would throw down a handful of seed, and it would lead a trail of flowers. You would throw down on this side, and it would lead a trail of fruit. And I believe that's because I could see you riding in fields that have been prepared for you by the ministry that's gone on before you for generations. That when it's time for you to sow seed, God will have already prepared the fields because of the blood and the sweat and the tears of your parents and your grandparents and your great-grandparents for generations. A generational impact, immediate fruit to your ministry. That's what I see for you. You know, I never knew 20 years ago when I was in Haiti, building that church, or watching other people build it, honestly, giving rocks to kids like it was candy, that 20 years later I would see this next picture, and it's the last one I have for you today. There's a picture of my son mixing concrete, building a church in Nicaragua. Never knew 20 years later that I would see it. I just said, I'll go to a missions trip meeting. And so what I want to do for you today is I'm going to pray for you before I close. I've gone past my time. But I want to make sure you remember there's a missions trip meeting after church today. And if you'll step into that meeting, there's a chance that you will step into the great adventure that God has for your life. And I'm going to invite you to it. And maybe if you don't, even if you don't come to the meeting, I still want to see generational impact. I want to see you have fruit in your ministry. I want to see your daughters and your sons have fruit in their ministry. I want to see your grandchildren have fruit in their ministry. And it begins today, okay? So let's pray. You guys go ahead.